I want to be clear about one thing before I tell you the rest. I was not trying to kiss the Queen of the Velaraven. I know how that sounds. I have had time to consider exactly how it sounds because since the moment it happened, approximately 400 palace officials, 17 foreign dignitaries, 2 compact ambassadors, and 1 extremely unhelpful staff coordinator named Prel Orvath have all offered their assessment of what I was trying to do. None of them was correct. None of them was in that corridor. None of them has spent 8 years as a cultural envoy for the Compact, learning to read body language across 43 alien species, and none of them has ever stood 2 feet from a sovereign who turned her head at precisely the wrong instant, while I was leaning in to murmur something into her ear about the seating arrangement in the hall of reception. So, let me tell you what actually happened. All of it in order, from the beginning. My name is Solon Wrath. I am 38 years old. I am a Compact Cultural Envoy, Class 1. I assigned to the Velaraven Diplomatic Outpost on the first day of what was supposed to be a straightforward 18-month posting to a mid-tier allied court. I have a plain face, dark hair that is beginning to gray at the left temple, a scar across my right jaw from a collapsed transit scaffold on my 3rd posting, and approximately no reputation in the Velaran Royal Court, which is how I preferred it. I am not the kind of person who seeks to be remembered. I have spent most of my career trying not to be noticed. I mention that so you understand that what happened was not a plan. The Velaran Court operates on a system of protocol so intricate, so layered with centuries of precedent, that the Compact spent 11 years producing a 400-page briefing document about it. I had read all 400 pages. I had read the supplemental volumes. I had spent 2 months in pre-posting training with a Velaran protocol instructor named Advisor Sorvin Kuth, a small, precise woman who communicated primarily through the controlled thinning of her lips. And I had emerged from those 2 months with what I believed was a working understanding of how to move through the Velaran Court without causing an incident. I was wrong. But I did not know I was wrong until the 22nd day of my posting, which was the day of the reception of allied envoys. A formal court gathering held twice yearly, at which every diplomatic mission on station presented itself to the court, and the Queen acknowledged the Compact's presence and said something diplomatically warm, and everyone drank a small cup of grain wine and left in an orderly fashion. I was not supposed to be near the Queen. My role was to stand in the 3rd row of the Compact delegation between Senior Envoy Kath Vin and Trade at a Prince Sovil and do nothing. The Compact's formal presentation would be handled by Ambassador Vithi Dorn, a tall, organized woman who had been at this court for 6 years and who communicated everything she needed to communicate to me through the controlled compression of her left eyebrow. The problem was the seating chart. The hall of reception holds 800. The seating arrangement for the reception of allied envoys follows a precedence order established in the 14th year of Queen Saravine Velkith's grandmother's reign. It is, in other words, immovable, ceremonially locked, and I had discovered at approximately 6 in the morning on the day of the reception, while reviewing the physical layout of the hall, completely incompatible with the 3 new diplomatic missions that had arrived at court in the previous 6 weeks. The Compact's delegation had been assigned seats 417 through 434 in the East Gallery. Seats 417 through 422 had been physically removed 6 weeks earlier to accommodate a ventilation repair and had not yet been replaced. 6 members of the Compact delegation, including Senior Envoy Wren, had no seats. The hall would be sealed for the ceremony in 4 hours. Ambassador Dorn was aware of the problem. She was handling it. Specifically, she was handling it by being in a tense, low-voiced conversation with the chief hall coordinator in a side annex. And she had sent me as the newest member of the delegation and the one least likely to accidentally break any additional protocol rules to deliver a message to the Queen's coordination advisor, a tall official named Sorvinath, who would be in the outer preparation corridor behind the hall's eastern anteroom. The message was simple. The Compact delegation needed 6 supplemental seats placed in the East Gallery before the sealing hour. I had the message written on a small Compact diplomatic card. All I needed to do was find Soren Velrath, hand him the card, and return. The entire errand should have taken 15 minutes. It took 15 minutes to find the outer preparation corridor. Another 4 minutes to confirm that Sorvinath was not in it. He had apparently been reassigned to the north anteroom. The north anteroom was on the far side of the hall. The hall itself was in the process of being sealed. The great double doors on the east side were already closed, which meant I had to go the long way through the inner corridor behind the royal preparation chamber. I want to be precise about the geography, because the geography matters. The inner corridor behind the royal preparation chamber is approximately 12 meters long, 2 meters wide, walled in pale gray stone with gold thread light fixtures at 3 meters intervals, and is used exclusively by senior court officials and members of the royal household. As a compact Class 3 envoy on an errand, I was technically permitted to use it. The compact standing access rights covered all non-ceremonial corridors, but it was not common. In 8 years of cultural postings, I had been in approximately 11 such corridors at 11 different courts, and my experience was consistent. Move quickly. Do not make eye contact with anyone who looks like they own the space. And do not speak unless spoken to. I was moving quickly. I was not making eye contact. I was holding my diplomatic card and reviewing the mental map of the North Anteroom's location. I turned the corner at the far end of the inner corridor. Queen Saravine Velkath was standing 6 feet in front of me. I stopped. She was alone. This was, I understood, in the 3 seconds it took my brain to process the situation. Unusual. The Queen of the Court does not move through corridors unaccompanied. She has a household guard, a senior attendant, a protocol advisor on her left, and a documentation recorder on her right, at all formal events. In this corridor at this moment, she had none of those things. She was standing very still, facing the stone wall to my left, both hands clasped loosely in front of her, and the expression on her face was one I had seen before on the faces of rulers, who are very briefly in the narrow moments between public duties entirely themselves. She was tired, not the ordinary tired of a late evening, the tired of someone who has been performing composure for so long that when composure becomes briefly unnecessary, the face just releases. She had not heard me come around the corner. Her head was turned slightly away. I should have stopped. I did stop physically. The correct action, the protocol-appropriate action, the action that 8 years of training and 400 pages of briefing documents all pointed toward, was to stand still, wait for her to register my presence, and then execute a formal Class 2 greeting bow, which is the greeting owed by a compact envoy to a foreign sovereign in an informal setting. I was doing that. I was standing still. I was preparing the bow. Then, from somewhere back the way I had come, a door opened, and the sound of the hall preparation footsteps, the low tone of the ceiling bell test, a sharp instruction from someone with the carrying voice of a chief coordinator, came down the corridor in a wave of noise. The Queen's head turned toward the sound. My head turned toward the sound. We were both turning the same direction, and she was 4T from me, and when she turned, the turn brought her face directly toward mine, much closer than I had understood her to be, and I had been leaning slightly forward in preparation for the bow. I did not kiss her on the lips. I need to be precise about this because the account that circulated through the court in the 48 hours following the incident was not precise. What happened was that I was leaning forward, my head was angled for the bow, her head turned, and my mouth made contact with her left cheekbone, the outer edge of her left cheekbone below the eye. I had not moved. She had moved. The contact lasted approximately 1 second before I straightened immediately, stepped back 2 full paces, and stood in what I recognized, even in the moment, as the single most rigid posture I had ever held in my life. The Queen of the went completely still. I said, "Your Sovereignty, I offer the Compact's deepest apologies." I was preparing a formal greeting. The noise from the hall disoriented the approach. I stopped, because I did not have the remaining words. She did not speak immediately. The silence lasted approximately 4 seconds. I counted them. In those 4 seconds, I was aware of the following things: the light in the corridor, which was the pale gold of the court's morning cycle illumination, the faint sound of the hall preparation still bleeding through from behind me, the smell of the corridor, which was stone, and the grain oil of the light fixtures, and something else faintly that I did not have a category for, and the expression on Queen Saravine Velkath's face, as she turned to look at me fully. Her face was not angry. That was the first thing I registered, and it confused me, because I had read the protocol documents for this kind of breach, and angry was the appropriate response. Anger, formal censure, the summoning of the household guard, and in extreme cases, the invocation of the Valerian Court Dignity Protocol, which would have resulted in my immediate removal from the court, and the formal notation of the incident in the Compact's diplomatic record. She was not angry. She was looking at me with the expression of someone who has just encountered something they did not expect and are deciding what it means. I want to describe her accurately because she is important to the story, and I was looking at her for the first time in a way that had nothing to do with protocol. She was perhaps 42. Amber gold, skin deep and warm, the color of the court's ceremonial lamps when they were turned fully up. Dark copper hair threaded with fine silver cord, the court threading the sovereign lineage marker piled formally, but with one loose strand that had escaped and lay along her jaw. Deep green eyes, the green of the old Velarin banners, careful in measuring. She was in her formal court dress, the deep burgundy and gold of the court's ceremonial colors, and she was even standing alone in a narrow corridor, having just been accidentally kissed on the cheekbone by a junior compact diplomat, completely composed, or nearly completely composed. The one loose strand of hair and the expression in her eyes were the only fractures, and they were small ones. "You were preparing a formal greeting," she said. Her voice was flat, not cold. Flat, precise. The way she said it, it was not entirely a question. "Yes, your sovereignty," I said. "A class I greeting bow." I was leaning forward when you turned. I was not attempting. "I know what you were not attempting," she said. I stopped talking. She looked at me for another long moment. I could not read her expression. I am reasonably good at reading expressions. I have spent 8 years in diplomatic service developing exactly that skill, and I could not read this one. It was not the composed court face. It was not the tired private face I had glimpsed before she turned. It was something else, something that had not yet settled into a category. "You are compact," she said, not a question. "Cultural envoy class. I soul in wrath." I was delivering a message to Coordination Advisor Velor about the East Gallery seating. I came through this corridor because the East doors had already been sealed. "The seating in the East Gallery," she said very carefully. 6 seats have been removed for ventilation repair. The compact delegation is short seats for 6 members. She looked at me then, very precisely she said, "That is the reason you are in this corridor." Yes. She was still looking at me. The expression had settled slightly into something I could almost categorize. It was not the expression of someone who was about to summon the household guard. It was the expression of someone who was very carefully deciding something. "The Valerian Court Dignity Protocol," she said, and my stomach dropped, "requires that any unintentional physical contact between a compact envoy and a Valerian sovereign be reported to the protocol registry within 6 hours, logged in the formal incident record, and reviewed by the Court Protocol Commission within 10 days. The Commission will determine whether the incident constitutes a breach requiring diplomatic censure." "Yes," I said. "I knew this. 400 pages. I will file the report," she said. "Yes, your sovereignty." "In the report," she said, and her voice was still very precise. "I will note that the contact was unintentional, initiated by my own movement, and lasted less than 2 seconds. I will note the envoy retreated immediately, and offered an immediate apology in the correct form. I had not used the correct form. I had said deepest apologies, which was approximately correct, but not technically the formal phrasing, and I did not point this out. The Commission will review it as a minor protocol variance. She said it will be resolved without censure. I breathed, "Thank you, your sovereignty." She looked at me for one more moment. Then she said almost quietly, "How long have you been at this court?" 22 days. She nodded very slightly, as though this confirmed something. Then she said, "The north anteroom is to your left at the end of this corridor. Coordination Advisor Velorath will be near the south wall. Tell him the Queen has authorized a supplemental seating arrangement for the compact delegation. He will have it handled before the hour." A yes, thank you. She said nothing further. She turned back to the wall. The audience, such as it was over. I went to find Coordination Advisor Velorath. I found him. I delivered the message. He executed the expression of someone who has been told to do something by a sovereign through an unconventional channel and is going to do it immediately and ask no questions. The supplemental seating was in place with 30 minutes to spare. The reception of Allied envoys proceeded without incident. I stood in the 3rd row of the compact delegation between Senior Envoy Wren and Trade at Asha Soville, and I did nothing. And I did not make eye contact with the Queen when she acknowledged the compact's presence, and she looked at me for precisely no longer than she looked at anyone else. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The report went to the protocol registry that afternoon, as the Queen had said it would. The protocol registry logged it as required. The log was as everything at the surviving court was accessible to senior court officials. By the following morning, approximately 60 senior court officials had accessed it. I know this because Coordination Advisor Velarath, who had apparently decided that the unconventional channel made us colleagues of a kind, came to find me at the Compact Delegation office at 8:15 and told me so. He was a tall, narrow man with the careful posture of someone who had been navigating court politics for many years, and he delivered the information with the controlled precision of someone who understood that I was going to need it. "The incident report," he said, sitting across from me in the delegation office while I held a cup of the Compact's preferred morning beverage and tried to look as though I was not alarmed, "has been read by 63 court officials as of this morning. It will be read by more before the day is out. This is not typical for minor protocol variances." "Why?" I said. He looked at me carefully. "The Queen has not filed a minor protocol variance report in 18 years of reign." "I see. Court officials read it because it is unusual. They will continue to read it because it involves a compact envoy and a question of physical contact in an inner corridor, and these are things that generate discussion in court environments." "I understand the nature of the discussion," he said. "Will depend on what the court believes the incident means." I looked at him. "What does the court believe it means?" Velarath was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The court does not believe it was an accident." I set down my cup. "The court," he continued, "is aware that compact envoys study protocol extensively. The court is therefore skeptical that a compact envoy would enter the inner preparation corridor without awareness of its significance, or lean forward in a greeting bow to a degree that would result in cheek contact. The court believes most of it that the incident was deliberate." "It was not deliberate," I said. He said, "I was not present in the corridor, but I know because I have been at this court for 19 years, and the incident you've described is consistent with a genuine disorientation, and not consistent with anything else. However," he paused, "what I know and what the court believes are different things." I sat with that for a moment. What does the court believing it was deliberate mean for me? Velarath looked at his hands briefly, then back at me. "The court dignity protocol," he said, "provides for the case of intentional contact, not intentional contact of a hostile variety. It has a separate provision for that. Intentional contact of," he paused again, clearly choosing his words, "a recognizing variety. What in the court's language would be called a claiming gesture." "I did not claim anything," I said. "I was delivering a message about seats." "Yes," he said. "The court does not entirely believe that either," I breathed. "What happens," I said carefully, "if the court believes a compact envoy made a Velarath gesture toward the Queen?" Velarath was quiet for a long time, long enough that I understood the answer was not a comfortable one. "The court dignity protocol," he said eventually, "does not have a mechanism for invalidating Avel's claim made in the inner preparation corridor by a person of legitimate diplomatic access. It has mechanisms for rejecting the claim. Those are held by the Queen alone. It has mechanisms for accepting the claim. It does not have a mechanism for simply setting the incident aside. So the court believes I made a sovereign claim," I said, and hearing myself say it aloud made it substantially worse. "A contingent one," he said, "unconfirmed. It becomes a formal claim only if the Queen acknowledges it as such. If she does not, if she files no further report, makes no acknowledgement, it remains a minor protocol variance and is resolved without consequence in 10 days when the Commission reviews it." She said it would be resolved without censure. I said yes. He said she did. I waited. That is, Velarath said, an unusual thing for a Queen to say to an envoy involved in a protocol incident. The Protocol Commission met on the 10th day. I attended because envoys involved in protocol incidents are required to do so. It was a room of 7 officials in formal court dress, seated behind a long, pale stone table, with a recording advisor in the corner, and the court protocol document on the table in front of the Central Commissioner. I sat across from them in the respondent's chair, which was slightly lower than the commissioners' seats, and I answered every question they asked, in careful, complete, accurate language. Was I aware of the significance of the inner preparation corridor? I was. Did I have legitimate access? I did. Did I enter with intent to initiate contact? I did not. Was the contact intentional? It was not. Did I retreat immediately? I did. Did I apologize in the correct form? I said deepest apologies, which was approximately correct, and I acknowledged that I had not used the formal phrasing. The commission deliberated for 6 minutes. Then the central commissioner, a woman named Velaraine Keth, not the same person as my pre-posting instructor, though the family name was similar, said that the commission found no evidence of deliberate protocol breach and recommended resolution without censure, consistent with the Queen's characterization of the incident. Then she said, "The Queen has submitted a supplemental notation." I was not expecting a supplemental notation. Neither, based on the slight shift in the posture of the 6 other commissioners, were they. The recording advisor read it. It was 3 sentences. The first sentence confirmed the Queen's account of the incident as already filed. The second sentence noted that the compact envoy had delivered a diplomatic message on behalf of the delegation in a timely and accurate manner, resulting in the resolution of the East Gallery seating deficit before the reception sealing hour. The third sentence, and here the recording advisor's voice did not change at all, which I respected, noted that the envoy had demonstrated in the Queen's assessment a quality of accurate attention that the court rarely encounters in its diplomatic relationships. The commission did not know what to do with this. I could tell by the 6 minutes of silence that followed the reading. The central commissioner looked at the supplemental notation. She looked at the other commissioners. She looked at me. The commission, she said, accepts the supplemental notation into the record. The incident is resolved without censure. The envoy is dismissed. I left. In the corridor outside the commission chamber, Coordination Advisor Velarath was waiting. He said nothing when I came out. He simply fell into step beside me. We walked for a while. We were approximately halfway to the compact delegation office before he said quietly, "Accurate attention." "Yes," I said. "The Queen," he said carefully, "has not filed a supplemental notation on a protocol case in 18 years. I looked at him. "You keep saying 18 years. It has been 18 years, he said, since anyone at this court demonstrated to the Queen's satisfaction that they were paying attention to her specifically, rather than to her title. I thought about that. I thought about the corridor and the loose strand of hair and the tired face before it had composed itself. I thought about the way she had stood with both hands clasped loosely in front of her, facing a plain stone wall, in the only 18 seconds of privacy she apparently had on the morning of a full court reception. She was taking a moment. I said before the ceremony, she didn't hear me come in. No, he said she did not. I saw her face before she knew I was there. I said before she turned. Velarath was quiet for a moment. What did you see? I considered how to say it accurately. Tiredness, I said, not the ordinary kind. He nodded. We walked for a while longer. The court, he said eventually, will watch you now. Everything you do, the delegation's work, your movements, whether you attempt to request an audience, whether you avoid requesting one, the supplemental notation is in the record. It cannot be taken out. The court will interpret it one way or another. What should I do? I said, your job. He said accurately. I did my job. For the next 6 weeks, I did exactly what a Class I3 cultural envoy at a mid-tier allied court is supposed to do. I attended the delegation's working meetings. I prepared briefing documents on the court's current ceremonial calendar, the protocol updates for the second half of the year, the 3 cultural exchange events that the Compact and the surviving court had scheduled for the following quarter. I attended the 2 subsequent court gatherings as part of the Compact delegation and stood in the correct row and did nothing that required documentation. The first briefing document I produced was the ceremonial calendar review. It was 41 pages, fully sourced with cross-references to the court's publicly accessible protocol registry and the Compact standing exchange agreements. I found the conflict between the proposed third-order exchange event and the Velaraine Court's internal commemoration schedule on the second day of research, buried in a footnote to a supplemental entry filed in the registry's 4th archive volume by a court clerk in the 22nd year of the previous reign. The conflict resolution was in the notes at the back of the section, as I had told the Queen. I had not expected anyone outside the delegation to read those notes. That was not why I put them there. The second document was the protocol update summary, 37 pages. I found 3 instances of policy language that had been amended in the main registry without corresponding updates to the secondary cross-reference index, which meant that if an envoy were following the secondary index, as the Compact's training documents recommended, they would be operating under outdated guidance. I noted all 3 instances with specific references to the primary amendments. I forwarded the summary to the delegation's protocol advisor, with a recommendation that the compact's training documents be updated at the next review cycle. None of this was exceptional work. It was accurate work. There is a difference, and the difference matters. The court watched. I was aware of this in the peripheral way that you become aware of attention when you have spent 8 years in diplomatic postings. Dorg works. The slight adjustment of postures when I entered a common room. The sustained looks from officials who had no professional reason to look at me. The 2 occasions when senior court advisors found reasons to have brief conversations with me about very minor logistical matters that could easily have been handled through normal channels. I answered all of it professionally and without comment. The first of those conversations was with a senior protocol advisor named Velarani Sorvin, no relation to the coordination advisor, who found me in the delegation's common room on the 14th day, and asked me with careful friendliness whether I found the Velaring Court's inner corridor system confusing. I told him that I had been confused on the day of the reception, because the East Gallery doors had already been sealed, and I had taken what I understood to be the next available route. He asked whether I had reviewed the corridor access documentation since then. I told him I had, and that I now had a clear understanding of the access system. He thanked me for my time. He had not needed that information. He was testing how I talked about the incident. The second conversation was with a junior court recorder who introduced herself as Prenels, and asked ostensibly about a formatting question regarding the compact's exchange documentation, whether I found the Protocol Commission review process intimidating. I told her I found it clear and well managed. She asked whether I had found the outcome satisfying. I told her I found it accurate. She wrote something in her notation pad and left. I did not find out what she wrote. I did not try to find out. The third conversation, which was not brief and was not about a logistical matter, and which I had been expecting since the morning after the commission, was with Ambassador Dorn herself, who called me into her private office on the 28th day after the incident and asked me to sit down, which she did not typically do for working conversations, and then asked me to tell her plainly everything that had happened in the inner preparation corridor in the commission chamber. And in the 12 days following I told her everything, all of it in order without interpretation. The accident, the Queen's characterization, the velour briefing, the commission session, the supplemental notation, the 6 weeks of court observation. When I was finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "The supplemental notation." "Yes," I said. "In 18 years of reign." She said yes. She was quiet again. Her left eyebrow did the thing it did, and then it did something else. A subtler movement, the kind that in 8 years of working with her, I had learned to read as reassessment. She was recalibrating something. "You did not request an audience," she said. "No. Why?" "Because requesting an audience to clarify an incident that the Queen had already characterized as minor would read as anxiety about the court's interpretation, rather than confidence in the accurate account. An anxiety about the court's interpretation would suggest I had something to justify." She looked at me for a moment. "And do you?" "No," I said. She nodded once. "Continue doing your job," she said accurately, and she returned to her documents. That conversation occurred on the 28th day. I continued doing my job. The court continued watching. Senior Envoy Wren asked me on the 31st day, with the careful lightness of someone raising a subject they had been waiting to raise for a while, whether I had given any thought to requesting a posting extension at the end of my 18 months. I told him I had not thought that far ahead. He said that seemed sensible. He did not say anything else about it, but the question itself was a piece of information. I did not request an audience with the Queen. I was not sure whether this was the correct decision. It was the decision I kept making every morning, and by the end of 6 weeks, I had made it 37 times, and was not significantly more certain than I had been at the start. On the 38th morning, a message arrived at the Compact Delegation Office. It was delivered by a court household aide, not an official, not a protocol officer, a household aide, which was a different channel than anything I had received before. The message was on a small card with the court's sovereign seal at the upper left. It said, "The coordination advisor to the Eastern Gallery has identified an ongoing discrepancy in the ceremonial seating registry dating to the 14th year of the previous reign. The resolution requires a documented review of the Compact's access records for that period. If the Compact's cultural envoy has capacity for this review, The Office of the Coordination Advisor requests a meeting at his convenience at the Eastern Archive Annex at the second working hour of the morning. I read it twice. I showed it to Ambassador Dorn. She read it once. Her left eyebrow did the thing it did. She said, "Go." The Eastern Archive Annex was a long room with pale stone walls and shelving units filled with bound record volumes, staffed by 2 archivists and illuminated by a double row of gold thread light fixtures. Coordination Advisor Velarath was there when I arrived, standing near a reading table with several volumes open in front of him. He greeted me with a precise nod. Queen Saravine Velkath was also there, standing near the far shelving, examining a record volume. She was not in court dress. She was in what I would later learn was the court's administrative dress, a simpler version of the formal garment, deeper burgundy with minimal gold, no ceremonial threading. The silver court threads were gone from her hair. The loose strand was there again along her jaw. She looked up when I came in. The expression on her face was the same one I had seen in the inner preparation corridor, the one I had not been able to categorize. I was still not able to categorize it, but I was closer. It was the expression of someone who has decided to do something they have not done in a long time, and is not yet certain whether it was the right decision. Velarath said, "The seating registry discrepancy is real. It will take approximately an hour to document. I'll begin the formal review." He moved to the far end of the room, opened another volume, and became professionally occupied with it. I walked to the Queen. She watched me come. When I reached a respectful distance, 2 arm lengths, which is the correct informal professional distance for a Class I envoy and a foreign sovereign, I executed a Class 3 greeting bow properly. This time with the correct angle in the correct hands. She said, "Soul and Wrath, your sovereignty." I said, "I have read your briefing documents." She said, "The ones prepared for the compact delegation, the ceremonial calendar review, and the cultural exchange planning documents." I had not been aware that the Queen read compact delegation briefing documents. They were filed in the diplomatic registry, which she technically had access to, but they were not typically material that a sovereign reviewed personally. I prepared them for the delegation's use. I said they are well researched. She said the section on the third quarter ceremonial calendar noted a conflict between the compact's proposed exchange event and the Surarving Court's internal commemoration schedule that the delegation's own calendar team had missed. Yes, I said the conflict resolution is in the notes at the back of the section. I read the notes, she said. The proposed resolution is workable. She paused. Accurate. I looked at her. She was looking at the shelving, not at me, and her expression had shifted again, the same direction it had been moving further into whatever category it was approaching. "Your sovereignty," I said, because there was something that needed to be said, and I had been carrying it for 6 weeks, and it was not going to become less important by going unrest. I want to say clearly in a context where it can be heard correctly. The incident in the inner preparation corridor was an accident. I was not attempting a Velarath claim. I did not understand the corridor's protocol significance in that specific context, and if I had, I would have taken a different route. I am aware that the court has a different interpretation, and I am aware that the supplemental notation you filed has made that interpretation difficult to resolve. But I want you to know what actually happened, because it matters that you have accurate information. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I know what happened. I know you know." I said, "I'm saying it anyway, because you deserve accurate information about the people in your court, even when the formal record is already settled." She looked at me then directly, the same full look she had given me in the corridor, the one I had counted 4 seconds of, except this time it was longer, and she was not calculating a protocol response, and the expression had settled. 18 years, she said quietly. Not to me exactly, more to the room. Then more directly, my husband died in the 18th year of my reign. He died of a disease that the court's medical advisors spent 4 months misidentifying, because they were attending to the political implications of his illness, rather than the clinical facts. When I reviewed the medical records afterward, I found that accurate diagnosis had been available at the end of the first week. It was not pursued because the correct diagnosis was politically complicated, and the incorrect one was not. She stopped. The room was very still. Velarath at the far end was turned entirely away. I filed a formal protocol inquiry. She said the court processed it correctly and thoroughly, and the advisors responsible were censured. The protocol was updated. Everything was handled correctly. And she stopped again, briefer this time. Nothing changed about the fundamental question, which is that the court attends to the implications of things more carefully than it attends to the things themselves. I did not say anything. I was not going to say anything she hadn't asked me to say. After a moment she said, "Accurate attention. That is what I wrote. Yes, I have not written it about anyone at this court before." She said, "I read that." I said, "Velarath told me." She almost not quite smiled. It was in the region of a smile. The edges of her expression moved toward it, and then returned to where they had been, but the movement had happened. "Velarath is useful," she said. "He is," I said. "He came to find me the morning after the commission log went out, and told me what the court believed and what it meant. Without that information, I would have handled the next 6 weeks very differently." "How would you have handled it?" She said, genuine curiosity, precise and unhurried. "I would have requested a formal audience," I said, "to apologize again and clarify, which would have confirmed the court's interpretation." She nodded slightly. "Instead, you did your job accurately," I said. This time the almost smile became a full one. Brief, no more than 2 seconds, but genuine, and it reached the green eyes, and I understood in those 2 seconds what the expression had been, the one I had been unable to categorize in the corridor in the commission chamber, and the first minutes of this conversation. It was relief, not the sharp relief of a crisis resolved. The slow, cautious relief of someone who has not trusted something in a long time and is finding very carefully that the thing they are being asked to trust is actually what it appears to be. "The seating registry review will take Velor approximately an hour." She said. Her voice had shifted slightly. Not formal, not the court voice, but not the private one either. Something between them, something that was still settling into its shape. "I will review the compact's access records for the relevant period. We can work at this table. Yes, your sovereignty." We worked at the table for an hour and 6 minutes. The registry discrepancy was real and was resolved, documented in the archive log in the proper form. Velor filed the documentation. I contributed the compact's access records for the relevant period which I had in my briefing archive, because I had reviewed the full historical record when I prepared the ceremonial calendar document. We talked while we worked about the archive, about the record-keeping practices of the 14th year of the previous reign, which were inconsistent by modern standards, about the 3 cultural exchange events planned for the next quarter, and the calendar conflict, and the proposed resolution, about the difference between the compact's diplomatic access rights as written and as typically exercised, which was a gap I had noted in my first week, and not yet found the right moment to raise through formal channels. She listened to all of it, not the listening of someone processing political implications, the listening of someone who wants the information. She asked 2 clarifying questions, both precise, both about facts rather than implications. When the hour was up and the documentation was filed, she stood and I stood, and we were at the end of the working meeting. Velarath was closing volumes at the far end of the room. She said, "The calendar conflict resolution you proposed, the adjusted date for the exchange event. It will require a supplemental entry in the court's internal commemoration schedule. I will have it filed. The delegation will send the formal confirmation today," I said. She nodded. She looked at the shelving again for a moment, then back at me. The expression had settled fully now. It was not relief anymore. It was something quieter and more careful. The expression of someone who has decided something and is not going to announce the decision, but is going to carry it. Sullen wrath. She said the formal account of the incident in the inner preparation corridor will remain in the protocol registry. The commission's resolution will remain. The supplemental notation will remain. She paused. The court will continue to interpret those documents as it chooses. I cannot prevent that. "I know," I said. "What I can do," she said, "is what I have done in this room, which is to speak to you plainly, without the court's interpretive frame about what is accurate and what is not." I looked at her. "The incident," she said, "was an accident. You are correct about that. It was my movement, not yours." I turned at the wrong moment. I was not attending carefully to my own space because I was the briefest pause otherwise occupied. Taking a moment, I said, "Yes," she said, "taking a moment." Something in her voice shifted slightly on the last word, something that was not public. "The court does not believe it was an accident." "I cannot change what the court believes, but you should know." She stopped, collected herself with a precision I recognized as practice, and began again. "You should know that I did not file the supplemental notation because of any interpretation the court holds. I filed it because it was accurate. I stood with that for a moment. Accurate attention, I said. Yes. Then I will say something accurate in return, I said. With your permission. She waited. The loose strand of hair, I said, along your left jaw. You had it in the corridor and you have it now. I don't know if it's deliberate or not. I don't know enough about your court's aesthetic protocols to say, but it is the most human thing I have seen at this court in 22 days, and it is the reason I have been certain from the first moment I saw you in that corridor that you are a great deal more than what the formal record describes. She was very still. That is an accurate statement, I said. Not a diplomatic one. I wanted you to have it. The silence lasted a long moment. Then she reached up very precisely and tucked the loose strand behind her left ear. The movement was composed and deliberate, and the ghost of the almost smile was back, this time quieter and more certain. I will consider it received, she said. She walked to the archive room's east door, and Velor followed, and I stood at the reading table in the Eastern Archive Annex with several bound record volumes and an accurate account of what had happened. And I thought about the 18 years, and the tired face in the corridor, and the way a person carries the specific kind of weight that comes from having the most important information in every room, and nobody in the room willing to simply look at it clearly and say what they see. I finished reviewing my records. I put them back in my archive case. I walked to the door. Outside the door, Velorath was waiting. We walked for a while. At approximately the halfway point to the delegation office, he said she tucked her hair. Yes, I said. In 19 years, he said, I have not seen her tuck her hair. I didn't have anything to say to that. We walked the rest of the way in quiet. That evening, Ambassador Dorn reviewed the documentation from the archive session. She reviewed the exchange event calendar update and the new supplemental entry. She reviewed my briefing notes for the morning's work. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, the seating discrepancy was resolved. Yes, I said. The calendar conflict is resolved. Yes, the protocol registry incident, she said carefully, is filed and closed. Yes. She looked at me for a moment. Her left eyebrow did the thing it did, but differently than usual. Less compression. Something that was almost evaluation. You're going to be here longer than 18 months, she said. It was not a question. I thought about the archive room and the working table and the precise listening and the careful voice that was neither the public one nor the private one but something between them, something that was still finding its shape. I think so, I said. She nodded once and went back to her documents and I went back to mine. The court, as Velorath had said it would, continued to watch. The court continued to interpret the protocol registry, the supplemental notation, the archive session log, and every subsequent compact delegation document that the cultural envoy with an incident on his record produced. The court drew its conclusions, as courts do, from the information available to it. What I knew and what the court did not have direct access to was the thing that had been said in the archive room in plain language, between two people who were trying to be accurate with each other, in a place where accuracy was rare. That the incident had been an accident, that the notation had been filed because it was true, that a strand of hair and a moment of plainness in a quiet corridor had been seen clearly, and had been worth saying. The court would go on interpreting the documents. The documents would remain in the registry, accurate and incomplete. The way all documents are, they capture what happened and they miss what it meant. What it meant was this. Sometimes in the narrow space between a door and a turning head and a half-prepared bow, the thing that matters most is simply that someone was paying attention accurately, without agenda to the person themselves, rather than to the title. The Queen of the Court had spent 18 years waiting for that. I had spent 22 days not knowing I was the one carrying it. I filed my afternoon report, marked the calendar update confirmed, and began preparing the next briefing document. I did the job.